Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you all. My name is Ismail Bilal Salim, coming to you live from Masjid William Salam, talking about comparative religion. Everything that I say is the truth. Everything that I say of the truth is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any mistakes that I make, any errors that I make are my own. What we have been talking about, and we'll continue, is talking about the crucifixion. I wanted to put a bit of a crowning jewel on this. As I said, each week I felt that the evidence that was presented was clear enough to show what Allah says in the Quran, that he was neither killed nor crucified. But there is more evidence to illustrate. So I'll be doing that today. But this will be the beginning of the ending of it. Just because it should be, it's almost overkill at this point. My mom will be on here shortly. She asked me if I was going to say anything about what happened this week. I would only say, and I was looking at a video of Imam Omar Suleiman, and he was quoting a scholar who said, this life is but a dream. So therefore we shouldn't be too high when things are good or too low when things are bad, because we realize that the true life is after this one. With that said, we still have to live this life, so we should be safe, safeguard ourselves from those who wish us harm, those who see things differently from us. I thank all the people for sending me prayers and talking to people who can talk to me to keep my bearings, because I do get upset. There's only one person on this earth right now that I hate, and anyone who follows me on Facebook probably knows that. And I do feel that when someone is victimizing people, that you should have some disdain for them, at least until that oppression, until that suppression, until that persecution is ceased. The person who is doing this has not subsided. He has not relented. So I won't relent. I don't forgive people who don't ask for forgiveness. I don't forgive people just because my religion says to forgive people, but they say to forgive people who have asked for forgiveness. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if we're following in his footsteps, he forgave the Meccans after he was in the power and the ability to forgive them. He didn't forgive them while he was being persecuted. So once he was the leader in Mecca, once he won and was victorious, he asked, should I punish them or should I give them forgiveness? And he gave them forgiveness. So until then, we are still persecuted and oppressed. So that's how I feel about him and anyone else who I feel is an oppressor. So back to the story at hand. We left off last week. Well, first I want to mention that I'm going to call this alive, because this is the key word for this week, alive. And while I'm talking, I want you to think about the word alive, because it's vitally important. And I posted a little bit earlier today a couple of books that were inspiring to me, that helped me gain this knowledge and information that I'm conveying with you now. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Nothing that I say is something that I came up with on my own. My mother was integral in this, and there's a part where I'll be talking about something that she conveyed to me on this story today. This brother Ahmed Didat made this book called Crucifixion or Crucifixion when I was a teenager. I ordered this book. I couldn't afford it. I didn't have money to buy it, so I ordered it. It took forever to come. And I watched this video, and then I saw this book called The Passover Plot. And I read this book. All of these helped me to gain the information that I am giving you, that I have been providing you these last couple weeks. So we'll start off with Jesus being taken off the cross. Because people being on the cross during the Sabbath was sacrilege, it became the occasion where people had to be taken off of the cross. Remember, the Sabbath is on Friday. It begins on Friday around 6 o'clock. So because crucifixion is a lingering death and it takes days in order for people to die, there became a situation, there was occasions, there was a protocol for this when people were still on the cross and they had not died yet. In this instance, they would break the people's legs that were on the cross. Both the men who were on the cross with Jesus on his two sides were still alive, and when they came down, they had their legs broken. But the soldier said he saw that Jesus was dead already, so he did not break Jesus' legs. There have been numerous cases of people who have escaped death by pretending to be dead. The victim of a crime is injured, and then the criminal perceives that that person is dead. There have also been cases of professional doctors who have pronounced people deceased when they're actually still alive. So that this soldier says he saw that Jesus was dead. Assalamu alaikum, sister. It's something that we should not give a lot of credence to, particularly when I provide the evidence coming forth. One of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side while he's on the cross. Clearly, he did not believe that the other person who saw that Jesus was dead, he actually was correct in seeing so. So he pierced his side to assure himself that Jesus was dead. And immediately, blood and water came from his wound. Had Jesus been dead, his blood would have begun to clot. But it says that the blood came out forthwith, which is another testimony that Jesus was alive. That's the key word today. Forthwith means it came out immediately. The blood and water were not slowly leaking or oozing out as one who was already dead. And this is what I was showing you earlier, the Passover plot by this man named Dr. Hugh Schoenfield. He has the Passover plot talking about the same things that I'm talking about now. He says the reported emission of blood shows that at least that life was still in him. So he was still alive when, after the man said he thought he was dead, and then the man pierced his side. John's gospel then speaks of a prophecy where Jesus' legs will not be broken. This is in John 19. So let us go to that prophecy. The prophecy is in Psalms 34. It says, many are the ills of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of all of them. All of them. It goes on to say, he kept all his bones. None of them is broken. Now I was going to elaborate on that, but I'm gonna let that marinate for you a little bit. When you touch your hands and touch your feet and think about the idea that a nail went through it and none of your bones are broken. If this prophecy is true, then God did deliver him from all his difficulties, including crucifixion. This is another affirmation that God heard his prayers and saved him. When Jesus is said to have died, a great phenomenon happened. Actually, multiple phenomena happened. The curtains from the temple in Jerusalem were split. There was an earthquake. Graves of the dead were opened, and saints were resurrected and walking around in the streets. And there was an eclipse for 3 hours. All of these things happening simultaneously. There has never been a sequence of such extraordinary events in the history of mankind. The curtains were torn, there was an earthquake, graves were opened, saints were resurrected and walking in the street, and then there was an eclipse for 3 hours. Some people view this as God's anger, but I see this as a diversion for Jesus' condition and how he was able to escape death. When Pontius Pilate finds out that Jesus is dead, he marvels, according to Mark 15, because he crucifies people all the time. He knows the man was only on the cross for 3 hours. He wasn't on the cross long enough to be killed. He wants to know how long Jesus was dead. The interesting thing is that he asked a centurion, a Roman soldier, but this Roman soldier that he asked actually became a follower of Jesus. He said, while watching Jesus on the cross, he says, this man is a son of God. This man is a righteous man. So Pontius Pilate, remember, he was the one who did not want to crucify Jesus. He was a Roman governor, who tried everything he could in order not to crucify Jesus. He sent him away three different times. He tried to get another man crucified instead of Jesus. So Pontius Pilate is doing everything in his power to avoid crucifying Jesus. So the centurion, according to the Gospels that's in the Bible, gave him an answer, but it doesn't say what that answer was. And then we establish that we remember that Pontius Pilate did not want to have him crucified. In fact, the gospel said he was afraid to be a part of his crucifixion. It says in John 19. So he will do anything in his power to avoid crucifying Jesus. So at this point, we have two believers. I'm sorry, I skipped the point. Pontius Pilate gives Jesus over to a man named Joseph of Arimathea, right? And Joseph of Arimathea is a secret disciple of Jesus. This is in John 19:38. Now listen, we all know about the 12 disciples of Jesus. One of them allegedly betrayed Jesus, and the other 11 ran away. There is another man who is a secret disciple, according to the Gospels. His name is Joseph. He comes and gets the body of Jesus, right? So we have Joseph and the centurion, who are followers of Jesus. And then we have Jesus' sympathizer in Pontius Pilate, all of them holding Jesus' fate in their hands. Could it not be possible that the centurion soldier who believes in Jesus informed Pilate that Jesus was still alive? And now Pilate has found a way to relieve himself of any guilt and any wrongdoing. If Jesus was alive, Pontius Pilate would definitely help. He's the one whose wife was getting dreams not to harm this man. Now, according again to this book, The Passover Plot, I just want to read a quote from it. It said, "It is by no means a novel theory that Jesus was not dead when he was taken from the cross. And some will have that he subsequently recovered. However, we have to imagine very little, since Mark and John, the Gospels in Mark and John, agree on what is essential to the requirements of this situation. We have only to allow that in this, as in other instances, Jesus made private arrangements with someone he trusted, who would be in a position to accomplish his design. This person is personified as Joseph of Arimathea." Interestingly enough, Joseph is the one who brings him off of the cross, this secret disciple. The gospel refers to Jesus as an it, and the author of the gospel clearly believes that Jesus is dead. But when Joseph asked for the body, he used a word called soma in Greek, which means a body, not his corpse, which is patoma. So he's using words as if Jesus is actually still alive, not that he is dead. Now, Joseph, the secret disciple, and another person named Nicodemus, who is a Pharisee and a ruler of the Jews, took Jesus away from the cross. So again, we have another secret man who is following Jesus. Clearly, Nicodemus was another secret disciple because he's a Pharisee, and all the Pharisees hated Jesus. They were his biggest detractors. They followed him around wherever he went, saying that he was teaching falsehoods. So we have now two secret disciples. We must ask ourselves, what is the motive? What is the reason for having secret disciples? Why do you have secret followers? When you choose someone as your secret disciple, a secret supporter, you conceal their identity for a greater purpose. Now that purpose is at hand. Joseph and Nicodemus is said to prepare Jesus' burial, and they wrapped him in linen cloth and spices that weighed 100 pounds. This is in John 19. Now Joseph was a counselor and a rich man. He had his own land, and he put Jesus into a sepulcher. A sepulcher is a tomb or a room where a dead body goes. He actually created the sepulcher or tomb on his own. He built it. So he knew where Jesus was going and where he was taking him. He built the thing himself on his own land. And Jesus was put into this sepulcher or this tomb. Tombs allow for breathing as well as movement, both of which are needed for someone who is alive. Obviously, Joseph had this sepulcher built long before Jesus was arrested, so he had planned and prepared this situation. Meanwhile, the chief priests and the Pharisees recalled Jesus saying that he'll be raised on the third day. They feared that his disciples would come and steal Jesus away and then say he had risen. So the chief priests and the Pharisees go to the sepulcher with a guard, thinking, and this is what the gospel said, that their last error will not be as bad as their first error. This is what it says in Matthew 27. The first error was having the secret disciple taking Jesus off and putting him into the sepulcher. But it doesn't say what the first error is. It is probably allowing Jesus to be taken down without them verifying that he was killed. Since the Gospels do not say what this error is, we have to leave it to our own speculation. But now in desperation, they go to this tomb, to the tomb of Jesus. On the Sabbath day is when they go. And the seal from the tomb, and they seal the tomb closed. So when Joseph pushed Jesus into the tomb, he left the tomb door open. When they got there, they had to close it. Right? And this is despite the fact that Matthew states that Joseph already rolled the stone closed. Apparently, he left the door open. What did he leave the door open for? Right? Also, remember, this is on the Sabbath day. They're doing work on the Sabbath day, which means whatever this error was, it was so important that they would break the Sabbath in order to do it, in order to close that door. Another point to consider is that the centurion and those who believed in Jesus were watching Jesus while the earthquake happened, while he was on the cross. And it says, and they saw the things that were done. This is in Matthew 27. Think about what these things that were done, why he changed his mind and realized that this man is now a person of God. So now at the tomb, there's an angel at the tomb, which is standing guard over the tomb. And the disciples are told, do not enter the tomb. They said, no. Mary and the other Marys came to the tomb, and the angel says, they can't enter the tomb because Jesus is not in there. So let me ask you this. The door was open. Where was Jesus? If he was put into the tomb, they come the next day looking for him. Why is he not in there? Mary Magdalene and the other Marys witnessed everything that happened from the cross. They witnessed Joseph and Nicodemus taking him down and preparing his burial with 100 pounds of spices. And they witnessed the angel inside of the tomb. They were an eyewitness to everything that happened. If Jesus were alive, they certainly would have known it. Luke said that they saw where he was laid and, more importantly, how he was laid. This detail is very important because it says they came there with their own spices. After they already knew that Joseph and Nicodemus put 100 pounds of spices on Jesus. So the women came there using the spices as a cover so they can find the living Jesus. His body was already prepared. So when they came there with the spices, they came there for a different reason. John's gospel speaks of Mary Magdalene going by herself to the tomb. And interestingly enough, she uses language that is dissimilar from the gospel writers themselves. She doesn't presume that Jesus is dead. So she says, where have you laid him? When the gospel writer says it. She says, she calls him Lord and him as if he is still a living person. And when she arrives at the tomb and the tomb is empty, she assumes that someone has taken him, not taken it, and laid him somewhere, not buried him somewhere. So Mary tells Peter and the other disciple, who is nameless, about what is happening. They run back to the sepulchre, to the tomb of Jesus, and they notice that the linen cloth is unwound and the shroud that's supposed to go on Jesus' face is removed. Christians assert at this point is when Jesus was already resurrected. But at this point, I got a question for you all. What is the nature of resurrected beings? This is vitally, vitally important. It is universally accepted that when you are raised from the dead, you are a spiritual being. You are immortal. And if anybody has any doubt of this fact, let us consult Jesus and see what he has to say. In Luke 20, he says, the resurrection from the dead, neither will they marry, nor will they be given in marriage. Neither can they die any more, for they are equal unto the angels and are children of God, being the children of the resurrection. So Jesus should have been a resurrected immaterial being. If that is the case, then why did he need two legs that were not broken? Why did he need the door open? Why did he need the sepulchre open when the guard had sealed it? Why did he need his linens unwrapped? And why did he need the shroud taken off of his face? None of this would be necessary unless Jesus was a mortal human being. The fact of an empty tomb only gives clear evidence that he was a mortal man. Otherwise, where was his bones? When they went into the tomb, the tomb should never, ever be empty. People keep texting me and buzzing my phone. The tomb should never be empty. Where was his bones? You know where the bones were? Inside of his body, walking around. Spirits don't have bones. They don't need bones. Where was his corpse if he had died? It was nowhere to be found because he was alive. In fact, in John's gospel, it says the shrouds were still laying in its place, separate from the linen. The shroud is what goes over his face. In other words, it was still laying there because it had never been used. It said it was still in its place. It was never put on his face because he was alive. These things are right in front of our faces. Yet somehow it's difficult for us to see it. Again, quoting from this book, The Passover Plot, it says, if we discard the charge that the body of Jesus was removed in order to claim that he had risen from the dead, we are left with the perfectly natural and fully justifiable reason that Jesus was taken from the tomb at the first possible opportunity for the entirely legitimate purpose of reviving him. And we'll keep going. So when the guards saw the angels had descended from heaven, they were terrified, almost to the point of death, what it says in Matthew 28. When the two Marys left, the guard and the chief priests and the elders, they saw what happened. And they were talking about what happened. And the elders bribed the soldier to pay the disciples bribed the soldiers to say that the disciples had stolen the body away, because they didn't have any bones inside of there. There was nothing in the tomb at all. The soldiers told the elders and the chief priests that Jesus was no longer in the tomb, which means that they would still be seeking after him to kill him again. The two Marys, knowing this, were afraid and said nothing of it to anybody but the disciples. This is what's said in Mark 16. Why were they afraid to tell anybody that Jesus wasn't in the tomb? Why? If he was truly resurrected, they could not kill him again. So why were they afraid to tell him? He could only be harmed if he was a human being, if he was alive. And Jesus knew full well that the dangers that he faced. At this point in the tomb, at the tomb, Mary Magdalene is by herself. She's in distress, crying. I told you this lady is his wife. She's crying by herself, wondering where Jesus is. She's weeping, and then she turns because she believes that she's weeping because she believes that the Jewish hierarchy had foiled her plans to rescue her husband, Jesus. So she was speaking with the angel who told her that he wasn't there. Then it says she turned her back and saw Jesus standing and did not know it was Jesus. Listen. The Bible doesn't say it's his wife. I am concluding that it's his wife, but she is definitely one of his closest disciples who was right there with him, talking to him while he was on the cross. So she is at the very least, one of his dedicated disciples who stayed with him the entire time when one person betrayed him and all the other ones ran away. She is looking at him and doesn't know who he is. Why do you think that is? And Jesus asked her, he says, why are you crying? Who are you looking for? She still doesn't recognize his face or recognize his voice. Mary asked him, if you have taken Jesus, show me where so I can take him away. I'm telling you that lady is his wife. I'm not even going to entertain the thought that she's not. There's no way that lady would be that close to him and try to take him away by herself. And why would she think she can carry a dead body away? Clearly, she knows that this man is alive. After 3 days, a dead body would be stiff, and the dead weight plus the 100 pounds of spices on him, it would be practically impossible for anyone to take him away. It is clear that Mary is looking for a physically live Jesus. But he's right in front of her, and she still doesn't recognize him. The reason she does not recognize Jesus is because he is in disguise as a gardener. Sounds crazy, right? John's gospel says she supposed he was the gardener. This is in John 20:15. Ahmed Didat, from whom I got this book and many of these ideas, says, does resurrected bodies look like gardeners? The answer is obviously no. So why did she assume the man was a gardener? Because he was looked and dressed like a gardener. If I suppose that you, listening, are a mailman, it is because you're dressed as a mailman. As my intimate friend, at the very least, I told you, at the very least, she's an intimate friend and disciple of his. How is it possible that I am looking for you and looking at you? You have to be in disguise for me not to know who you are and assume that you are a gardener. Now Jesus decides to unmask himself in the middle of this story, and he calls her name in a manner. He says, Mary. And she recognizes him. And what does she do? When your wife sees you after she knows the trial and tribulation that you've been through, she tries to hug him. John 20:17 says, Jesus says to her, do not touch me, for I have not ascended to my Father. Why can't she touch him? Because Jesus is in pain from his injuries. So he says, do not touch me. This has to be the case, considering the fact that in a little while later, Jesus will have his disciples touching him. Also, it is clear to Mary that Jesus has not ascended to his Father. He's right in front of her. So what does he mean by saying, I have not ascended to my Father yet? He is saying that I'm right in front of you. I am alive. I'm not dead yet. I am not resurrected. He can't be saying I haven't ascended to my Father. She can see him. She's talking to him. Clearly she knows he hasn't ascended to his Father. He is saying, I am alive. And I'm injured, so you can't hug me. Do not touch me. Now, Jesus' testimony alone should be enough. He says, I have not ascended to my Father. And he's not saying I have not resurrected. He's saying I'm still alive. But there is more to this story. There is even more evidence that Jesus was in disguise. And why would he be in disguise? After Jesus recognizes him, Mark tells us that Jesus appeared in another form to two of his other disciples. Without the description of Jesus looking like a gardener in John, it would appear like Jesus is just coming out of our imagination, that he's into some other form. And it also makes an assumption like he's some kind of ghost, that he's appearing and disappearing. But with John's gospel in mind, we can see that Jesus was in another disguise when he met his two disciples. Without this understanding, that Jesus is a mere mortal and he's still alive, thus he is still vulnerable to death, we would assume that he's some kind of ghost who is slipping in and out of keyholes. But he is a man in hiding. He never goes to his enemies and says, aha, look, I'm alive, I'm resurrected. You can't kill me anymore. I told you should have been listening to me. He never, ever goes to any of his enemies who try to kill him. He only goes to his disciples because he is hiding. So on the road, he meets two disciples. He comes into their midst and he acts like he's dressed as a stranger. That says they think he is a stranger from Jerusalem. Because Jesus acts like he doesn't know Jesus. He's asking them, who is this man you're all talking about? And then they tell him about Jesus. And then he begins to teach to them. And then they invite Jesus to their home. Two disciples, people he'd been living with for I don't know how long. As long as we're his followers, they didn't recognize him. They go into his house. And the manner in which he breaks the bread and blesses it, they realize that this is Jesus. And as soon as they realize it, then he leaves. This is in Luke 24. How can his own disciples not know who he is unless he is in disguise? How do they not know who he is when they're talking to him, walking with him, inviting him to their home? And ultimately, the way in which he breaks the bread and blesses it is how they figure out who he is. Let us remember on several occasions, Jesus escaped death while he was in his enemy's grasp. In John 10, it says, and they tried to seize him, but he escaped through their grasp. In John 8, it says, at this, they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, sliding away from the temple grounds. In Luke 4, it says, they got up, drove him out of town, took him to the brow of a hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off a cliff. But he walked through the crowd and went on his way. Says he walked right through the crowd. They drove him all the way to the end of the cliff, and somehow he got away. How is it possible that this great teacher, this miracle worker, could go in the middle of multitudes? Some of them people are his believers, and some are his detractors. And in each of these instances, when he's about to be killed, he slips away. Could not a miracle worker transfigure his own image and have people think he's a stranger or a gardener? If you know the story of Jesus, you know this is the case. And I use the words transform, transfigure, because people who are familiar with this understand in the synoptic gospels in Matthew 17 and Mark 9 and in Luke 9, Jesus is recorded as transfiguring his appearance when he meets other prophets from old. Transfigures means to change your appearance, to give a new and typically exalted or spiritual appearance. So he has changed his appearance on more than one occasion. He has this ability to do so. In the instance that I was talking about when they tried to push him off a cliff, he is in the presence of his enemies, right at the edge of the cliff, speaking with them. And then somehow it says he walked right through the crowd. It is clear that Jesus disguises or camouflages himself in dire circumstances. Let us remember that he begged for at least 3 hours to be saved from death. So you know he would use this gift to avoid this horrid crucifixion. Now the other picture that I had the other picture that I posted on Facebook was of this book right here, the New World Translation of the Holy Scripture. My mom showed me something as a teenager that changed my life. It was in the Gospel of Luke. She had done her own research about religion, and she highlighted this segment that I'm going to read to you. And she wrote in the notes, Jesus in the flesh after being resurrected. Now, while you listen to this story, think about why this is so important. And think about what she is alluding to when she's saying Jesus in the flesh after being resurrected. And I just told you, a resurrected person is an immortal person. They are a spiritual being. They cannot be killed again. They are like angels, is what Jesus said. Now, I can say that the fact that Jesus was immortal should be laid to rest with what I'm going to give to you now. He waited for all of the 11 disciples to be together to confirm that he was alive, not resurrected. In Luke 24:36, it begins, and they were talking, meaning the disciples were talking. And Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum. In Hebrew, shalom alaikum. I told you, this man's Muslim. If you listen to the words of Jesus, you would be a Muslim. If you listen to Jesus and Jesus alone, you'll be following the example and adhering to al-Islam. He came before them and said, peace be unto you. Then it says the disciples were terrified and affrighted because they thought they saw a spirit. And he said to them, why are you troubled? Why are thoughts arising in your heart? Behold, my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see me have. And when he had spoken these words, he showed them his hands and his feet. And then they believed not for joy, is what the gospel says. And they wondered. What are they wondering? And he said to them, have you any meat? You got any food? And they gave him a broiled fish and a honeycomb, and he took it and ate right in front of them. Man, listen. In no uncertain terms, Jesus said he is the same person that you have known, you have slept with, you have eaten with, you have traveled with. What were the disciples thinking? Why were they thinking this? Why were they afraid when they saw him? It says it because they thought he was a spirit. So why were they afraid? Mary had told them that Jesus was alive, but they didn't believe her, is what Mark 16 says. Mary told them he is alive, and they didn't believe it. They thought that he was dead because they all forsook him and fled when he was arrested. So the reason they were afraid is because they thought they saw a ghost. Remember, Mary was not afraid when she recognized Jesus. She wasn't afraid because she was an eyewitness to everything that happened. She knew that he was still alive. But the disciples were terrified when they saw him because they thought they were seeing a ghost. Because Jesus told them when you are a resurrected being, you are like an angel. You can't die anymore. But Jesus assures them that he is not resurrected, but alive, and shows him his hand and his feet. And it says the disciples began to understand that Jesus escaped death. And they became excited and they wondered. What were they wondering? The Gospels, again, don't tell you what they were wondering. It just says they were wondering. I'm telling you, they're wondering, how did this man escape death and continues to escape death? And Jesus was hungry from all the ordeals that he had endured. And he asked them for food, and he ate the food right in front of them. He is confirming his mortality. What need does a spirit have for earthly nutrition? And what was the point of Jesus eating food anyway? There is no need for food and no point for food for an angelic, resurrected being. The only reason he was eating food was to show them that he was alive, not resurrected. Remember, when Jesus walked on water, the disciples thought that he was a spirit. And he showed them the same thing. He said, listen, I'm not a spirit. I'm the same person. Look at me, touch me. I'm the same physical human being. On both instances, they thought he was a spirit, and they were wrong. He was a physical human being that you can touch and walk with and talk to. His nature had not changed because he was a mortal man. Really, this should be the end of it. Jesus let them touch him, told them he is flesh and bones, not a spirit, and he ate food. This is what my mother was trying to show me. What changed my life forever is that a man ate food when he's supposed to be a resurrected being. Anything else that I add to this really is just overkill. The Bible shows that this man survived the crucifixion. I told you, if you read the Gospels without someone else's voice in your mind, you would know that he did not die on the cross. He survived. He was alive. And that was what he was showing his disciples. Now it says that he came to the 11, but suspiciously enough, doubting Thomas, another one of the disciples, was not there. John suggests that this disciple named Thomas was not amongst the 11 when Jesus showed him his hands and his feet. So despite their testimony, Thomas, where we get doubting Thomas, said he will not believe until he can actually put his fingers in the wounds of Jesus. What couldn't he believe? What is he doubting? What is he doubting? Jesus came to Thomas 8 days later, and he allowed Thomas to feel his wounds in his hands and his side. And finally, Thomas believed. This is in John 20. I'm asking you, what did Thomas finally believe? Did he believe that resurrected bodies have wounds? No, he believed what the disciples, what Mary told him, that he was alive, a physical, flesh and bone human being. What is important to note here is that he told Mary, you cannot touch me. Then 8 days later, he allows Thomas to touch him. Why did he change his mind? Well, what was the change of heart for? He has still not ascended to his Father, right? Because he's still right there. Obviously, as time progressed, his wounds healed, and 8 days later, the pain subsided, and he is able for people to touch him. That would be the only reason. Why would he be able to be touched and not be able to touch? 8 days later, he let Thomas touch him. We also must notice that Jesus is easily recognized by his disciples when he's inside of a building in John 20:19 and John 26. But when he meets them outside, they can't recognize him. As I said, he is hiding himself for fear that his persecutors will come after him again. What's up, brother? So even after he proves to his disciples that he is not resurrected, Jesus is outside again. And again, he is unrecognizable by his disciples who are outside fishing. He is speaking to them directly from the shore, and they don't know who he is. This is in John 21:1, 4, and 12. Jesus again is in disguise because he is alive. Why else would they not be able to recognize him? Is there any other plausible explanation to this sequence of events? I would love to hear the alternative to my view that the man that came down from a cross in 3 hours was still alive. The man that ate food was still alive. The man that you can touch and taste. The man who had a door open for him. The man who had his linen wraps taken off. was still alive. Jesus says in Matthew 13:13, seeing they see not. It is right here before our eyes. Jesus himself says, I am alive. Jesus tells Mary in John 20, he is alive. Mary tells the disciples in Mark 16, he is alive. The angels said he is alive. They said, why are you seeking the living among the dead? Is what they told the Marys, the three Marys when they came to the tomb. And again in Luke 24, it says, Jesus is alive. And this is the reason why I named this thing alive. I am often puzzled when I ride past a billboard that says Jesus is alive. I wonder if anyone ever considers the tremendous difference between the two words, alive and resurrected. They mean two totally different things. When you say someone is resurrected, you are saying that they are dead and they are raised back to life as a spiritual being. But if you say someone is alive, that means that they were presumed to be dead, but they actually did not die. So when you see it says Jesus was alive, that means he did not die. Jesus and the angels and Mary all confessed that Jesus was alive. The greatest Christian evangelist of all times, Paul, attests to this fact. In the book of Acts, Paul is arguing about Jesus. And some other people are saying that Jesus was dead. Paul says he is alive in Acts 25:19. The scribes and Pharisees came to Jesus. They said they want a sign. Jesus says, I'm not going to give you any sign except the sign of Jonah. And we talked about this maybe 2 months ago. As Jonah was in the belly of the whale, so shall the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth. And I said this, and I'm saying it again. What was the nature or what was the condition of Jonah in the belly of that big fish or whale? When he went inside of the belly of the whale, he was alive. When he was inside of the belly of the whale, he was praying. He was alive. When he came out, he was alive. He never died. So if Jesus is like Jonah, like him, then he also was alive and never dead. They are saying that he was dead when he went in there, resurrected when he came out. That's nothing like Jonah, nothing at all. The only way you would be like Jonah is if when he went into the tomb, he was alive. Inside of the tomb, he was alive. When he came out, he was alive. He was visiting his friends only, hiding from his enemies, being touched, and eating food. All of these things. In the book of Acts 1:3, it says, after his suffering, he presented himself and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. Let me remind you that Allah says in the Quran that they neither killed nor crucified him, but it was made to appear to them so. And those who believe that he was killed follow conjecture. They have no knowledge. They did not kill him. Definitely is what Allah says in the Quran. Assalamu alaikum.